Hi, everyone. My name is Ava. I go to school at UNC and I'm majoring in Spanish and global studies. And my travels have taken me to Spain, Cuba, and Costa Rica.
Good. All right, so we'll move on to transportation in Cuba and show you some other transportation options if you were to visit there.
So, the first mode of transportation that's super common in Cuba is the bici taxi. So, it's a bike and it seats two people. And many tourists use it as a way to get around the city and also get to view the city. And they do different tours where you can ride around and kind of get a history of the city and of Cuba while sitting and riding. And so it's a good way to get around within the city. And it is a good form of transport because when there was a lack of fuel, it's a resourceful way to get around without having to use any gas.
Since we have our delay with YouTube, I see some people that are watching from YouTube said they wanted to try the moto taxi and the bikes. All right, go ahead, Ava.
So this is another form of transportation called the Coco taxi, which is similar to the BC taxi. And there's two types. There's one that's yellow, which is for tourists, and then there's one that's black that is specifically for Cubans. And they're cheaper than other taxis and good to travel short distances. So guaguas are the bus, what Cubans call the public buses. And they are usually pretty crowded. As you can see, a bunch of people getting on. It looks like a bunch of students. And there's normally long lines to wait for these buses, and they don't have air conditioning. And they cost about 1 Cuban peso, which is 4 cents. So this is similar to the buses, but it's like they're like microbuses called taxiruteros, and they follow a route around the city, and they're generally cheaper than other forms of taxis. They cost around 10 Cuban pesos, which is 40 cents, and they're less crowded than the guaguas, but more expensive than the buses. So then there's intercity buses. There's three different types. Via Azul is specifically for tourists to get from one city to another, so they go across Cuba. And Transviagota is specifically for just Cubans to take in between cities. But these are nicer. And then there's the Havana Bay Ferry. So this ferry leaves from Old Havana Port and goes across the bay to the two different villages that are across. And it's a great way to see the water and to get to these different parts of Havana. So almendrones are the old Cuban cars that are been been made into taxis. So they're privately owned, and boteros are the individuals that drive these taxis, and they get to create their own schedule, which is different than in the U.S. And they make a decent amount of money, which is like probably like 1,000 US dollars a month. And that allows them to fix up these really cool old cars. And so they have shared taxis have a fixed route, and they're most common in Havana and Santiago de Cuba, which are two cities within Cuba. Yeah, and this is another picture of them. And so just like how Sammy mentioned in El Salvador, biking is also a common way to get around, and it's environmentally friendly. And we see bikes here all the time too. So that's something that we all have in common. And then hitchhiking, gained popularity, when there was a gasoline shortage in Cuba, like I had mentioned before, with the BC taxi. And so it actually was required for a short time, that cars, or people who were able to drive would pick up hitchhikers, if they saw them. So it was required by the government to, help people out, with transportation, and it's no longer required, but many times hitchhikers, there's still that's still a way that a lot of people get around. And hitchhikers refer or Cubans refer to hitchhikers, as ir con la botella, which is, translated to going with the bottle. So what kinds of transportation would you like to try if you were ever going to Cuba?
So we already had one person that said earlier that the Coco taxi looks super fun. So we'll see what else we get. Another one that they want to try the Coco taxi. That one has a fun name too. Someone else said the antique Cuban cars. And I believe the reason for that, Ava, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that there were not very many imports to Cuba for a long time. So they continued to kind of revitalize the old cars and keep them going.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Let's see if we have nothing from YouTube yet, but they'll probably be a little bit behind. Good. Thank you guys for sharing which ones you'd like to try. There's a lot of good options.